from St. Louis Public Radio. This is Politically Speaking.
Missouri Senate Democrats had a fairly successful 2022, thanks in part to big divisions within the Senate Republican caucus. And a big question going into the 2023 session is if infighting within the GOP will torpedo some major initiatives. Democratic Senator Doug Beck of St. Louis County joins us on the latest episode of Politically Speaking to preview the months ahead and discuss some of his priority legislation. Let's hit the music.
This is the Politically Speaking podcast, the definitive show about Missouri politics.
We have to talk about things that matter to people.
I've tried to bring that same aggressive iconoclast style with me to the United States Senate.
I think my district is a model for the state.
We put Missourians first.
You just kind of have to find the common ground with people.
I believe that this district deserves someone who represents their values.
After I came back to St. Louis, I started thinking that I could have a bigger role on the change that I wanted to make.
And welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm your host, St. Louis Public Radio political correspondent, Jason Rosenbaum. Joining me from Jefferson City, she is St. Louis Public Radio State House and Politics reporter,
Sarah Kellogg.
And joining us in studio in St. Louis, he is the state senator for Missouri's scenic and beautiful 1st Senatorial District,
Doug Beck.
And just remind our listeners just how beautiful and scenic the 1st District is by telling us what the geographic boundaries are.
So the geographic boundaries they've changed a little bit since we did redistricting, and they will include all of Webster Groves now, and the area around Webster Groves is now into the 4th. Some of that's in the 4th and some of it's in the 24th. But it'll be Webster Groves, Crestwood, Afton, where I live, Lee May, Melville, Oakville.
It was one of the most competitive state Senate districts in the state for the last 2 decades. I think with Webster in it, though, it's probably going to tilt Democratic for the future, but it won't be like a slam dunk. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it actually got a little bit more competitive.
Oh, boy.
In 20.
So you're going to have a fun 2024. But let's talk about 2023. What are your expectations for this upcoming session, which is inching closer to us by the second?
Yeah, so that's a million-dollar question. I am not sure, and as I've talked to all a lot of my political colleagues on both sides of the aisle, nobody really knows what's going to happen this session, and we're hoping for the best. We're hoping they'll be able to work with folks and be able to get some things done. I have a good relationship with the incoming floor leader, Senator O'Laughlin, and I believe I have a good relationship with the pro tem, Caleb Rowden. So I'm hoping those things go forward and we can work some things out. I know there's going to be some stuff that I don't like, and as the Democratic as our ideals that are going to probably come to the forefront, and they'll be their priorities. Sometimes, as you know, priorities are different between 2 different parties, and what we see is very important. So.
Democrats will once again have 10 senators over the next couple of years, and they've shown that they can exert a lot of influence in the process. So do you think that will continue?
I think we have a really great caucus. I want to say that right off the bat. We have a really strong caucus. We're together. Everybody has their own special talents and their own little lane that they stay in. But when it comes time to be together, all together, we can do that too. Very good. So it's probably the best group of people I've worked with. And I don't say that lightly, and that's not a political speech. That's the truth. It's a great group, and I think we'll do what we need to do and have to do for the people of Missouri, and we'll try our best to whatever we determine may be damaged to kind of limit that as best we can. So.
Do you believe that the disbanding of the conservative caucus will make your jobs harder since you may be dealing with a more united GOP caucus this time around, or is it kind of just a disillusion in name only?
Well, that goes to my opening statement, so I'm not sure exactly what we have here. I mean, everybody can say a whole lot of different things, and the proof will be in the pudding when we get together and we find out, if that's actually the case. I expect things to happen this year like they have in the past, where it'll push the limits of folks and push those relationships to a different level, and then we'll see what happens if a little sects form within the legislature.
Redistricting took up a lot of oxygen last year, and a lot of GOP priorities just didn't make it across the finish line because of that infighting. So do you have concerns that some of those items will make a comeback this year?
Well, they've already stated some of their items they want to get done before even spring break, and I believe it was CRT, some sort of bill on CRT.
A critical race theory, by the way. Yeah. Want to make sure that people understand those acronyms. Continue.
Thank you. And then they want to look at I don't know what the legislation is on the trans kids and things of that nature. It may be not only the sports aspect but medical procedures. They've said that was one of their priorities, and then some sort of parents' bill of rights for schools, which I think our parents already have that bill of rights. If you actually have a kid in public school and you get a handbook every year, you'll see what you can do and all the things that you're able to do in public education.
So, but didn't Senate Minority Leader Rizzo have his own Parents' Bill of Rights last year? Like, wasn't that an issue that Democrats were trying to co-opt for themselves to some extent?
He did. He had his Senate Bill of Rights kind of restated. It's kind of like when they did the Second Amendment Preservation Act, kind of restated the rights you already have, and a lot of those things were obvious, and they were kind of the opposite side of the coin that he proposed those Bill of Rights. I agree that as a former board member for 9 years, we definitely want our parents to be involved in their kids' education. That is for sure. That makes it a stronger bond. It helps, and we get better outcomes for sure. So I've always been an advocate for that, to be involved with your child's education. That's an important thing.
I have a bit of a follow-up, which is, I guess I'm curious as to if you've heard directly from Senator O'Loughlin or situations where anti-trans legislation is going to be kind of an early priority. I haven't heard too much of that yet.
I have not had that conversation with her. I'm going by what the interviews were that I saw and read. And if I misspoke, I don't think I did. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty solid on what I read. And also, she did mention an initiative petition in there too. Now, she didn't say that necessarily that would be before spring break, but that's a lot to do.
And to be fair, there has been legislation filed that would ban trans girls from participating in sports that align with their gender identity. So those bills are there. I was just curious as to prioritization kind of thing. There is new leadership in the Missouri House and the Missouri Senate on the Republican side, as you mentioned with on the Senate. But how do you think people like soon-to-be Speaker Plocher and Senate President Pro Tem to be Rowden will handle themselves with Democrats?
I get along with Speaker Plocher for sure. He came in a special election a little bit before me, but we started off on freshman tour together in the House, so I know him really well. We've had a lot of good conversations in the past. We've worked together on some things that we were both historic tax credits and things of that nature. We worked together on some things to try to move things in a different direction. So I think he'll be definitely different from the current leadership. I think the Speaker is open to avenues of getting some things done. I know he wants to have a good productive session, and sometimes that means different things for different people. And I think they'll probably get along with Senator Rowden, but that's again up to them and their relationship. And I don't know how that is. I'm sure it's probably fine.
Well, now let's transition into a topic that got a lot of airtime over the 2022 election cycle, and that is the whole issue of foreign ownership of farmland. You have sponsored a bill that would scale back the ability for foreign entities to own Missouri farmland. Can you just explain what your bill would do, and why do you think it's an important issue?
So I'll start with how I came across this issue in the first place, and it was I was sitting in a meeting, economic development committee meeting in 2018, and I seen the room was packed, and they were out in the halls with rural family farmers that came in, and the bill was this exact same bill here. Representative Martha Stevens was carrying it, and also Representative Hirsch. So it was a bipartisan bill that they had presented to economic development. And as I listened to it, if you know anything about me, I have a labor background, so I like to fight for working people and all these things. I felt like, wow, this is really an issue that we should be fighting for our family farmers. And And then I studied the history of how this all came about in Missouri, and if you look at it, it's sketchy at best.
Well, let's talk about the history.
Yeah.
You transitioned well. The reason that they repealed the ban on foreign ownership of farmland in 2013 is Smithfield was bought by a Hong Kong-based company, and Smithfield has a pretty large footprint within Missouri. So I think that it's a reasonable question to ask if your bill passed, would entities like Smithfield have to sell all their property in Missouri?
So currently, and this is, we have to talk about different parts of this bill to kind of get into what it's all about.
Yeah.
So in 2013, you're right, it was passed, and then actually Governor Nixon vetoed it, and then it was overridden in order to become law. And then 2 weeks later, I believe, somewhere in that time frame, Smithfield was bought out by a Hong Kong company. However, they got $1 billion loan from the Chinese government to do that purchase. So that was part of my argument when you hear this information is about, you talk about free trade, and that's really not free trade to me when a government can step in and give loans to a corporation to buy something, right?
Right.
However, in 2015, the law was changed. So originally it was supposed to be 1% of all Missouri farmland. That was the cap, right? And quite frankly, I don't even know if there's a penalty if you go above 1%.
I've heard there's no penalty.
Yeah. So
I hear it's unenforceable. So
well, it's definitely unenforceable now, because in 2015 they took off the provision that all sales of foreign entities had to go through the Department of Agriculture in the state. They took that part off. So now nobody knows, and so they just guess at what it is. And if you look at Missouri, they'll tell you it's like 0.03% or whatever else. But if you look at U.S. agriculture, they have us well over that 1% limit. So it's not tracked, and that's the biggest problem. And I would be open to discussions on tracking it or keeping it at that 1% or stopping it where it's at. And that's kind of what my legislation does. It basically stops the program where we are now. It doesn't take anything away from anybody. You can continue to have your land now. You cannot, however, transfer it, and you cannot add to it.
yeah, so and before Sarah asks her question, if Smithfield had a property and wanted to add 1 acre to it, they would not be able to do it under this bill.
That's correct.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, do you think that this issue would be not as pronounced if, say, an Italian, a French, or a Polish company had bought Smithfield?
Well, that's a good question, and you probably might be right, but I look at the aspect of any type of foreign ownership of something like a resource that we have, a finite resource, and when I'm talking about that is our farmland, that is something we have, and then you have your you have your food supply is affected, your national security is affected. Those are things that concern me. Do I want to get rid of InBev or Bayer? No, I don't know. Those are not things that I'm looking to do here.
It does seem a little odd that there's all this furor over Smithfield, but none over a Belgian company owning a beer company. It does. You kind of brought that point up yourself. What's the difference, basically?
And I think it's a big difference, because I'm talking about simply a finite resource where we feed our people. It's like literally one of the things that you do, is your concern is your housing, your comfort, your food. Those things there are basic necessities. And if somebody else controls them and can do something else with them, that's kind of concerns me. It's when the hog production in the United States, 50% of the hog production is controlled by a foreign entity. That concerns me. In general, and if you look at what has happened in some of these other countries, in particular China, what they've done with their farmland, they've destroyed it, and now they're coming here. And if you look at how our laws for clean water and all these other things have been, there's people that lobby for these things every day, and we see this all the time, to take away local control of clean water. Why are they doing that? And a lot of it is in areas where they have these CAFOs, where these CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations. All right, so I won't do that as like you said earlier. So.
Great job doing the acronym.
This was a major issue in the 2022 election, as Trudy Bush Valentine lambasted, soon-to-be Senator Eric Schmidt for his vote on this topic. But Schmidt ended up winning big, including in rural Missouri. So wouldn't that show that Missouri voters don't really find the foreign ownership of farmland to be a big deal?
I think it is a big deal, because you can go back. As I've talked to people from the rural area, it's one of the things that really motivates them, this foreign ownership. And if you look at the numbers that Trudy Bush Valentine did, the 13 or 14% or wherever her loss was, that it was better than Nicole Galloway did against Parson, which I think it was 17. So there is a thing there. There is a correlating number, I believe. And then if you look at the auditor's race, that was even more of a distinction. It was a 37. It was a lot bigger swing. So when we compare individual candidates and an issue, sometimes it gets a little hard.
Okay, Alan Green did not have $18 million at his disposal, so I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole. But I do want to kind of push back against something, because I talked with farmers about this issue, including Democratic farmers in Northeast Missouri, who do not like the fact that Smithfield is owned by, a foreign entity. And I asked them, do you think people care about this? And they said no, because there's not a lot of evidence that Smithfield existing affects a farmer's ability to make money and operate. Why are they wrong on that?
Why are they wrong? I don't know if they're wrong or not wrong. I just know that what I see and what I think to believe is right and wrong. And I think it's wrong for a company, and especially a company that can be controlled by a government, to own farmland, to own one of our most precious things that we have. And I know I keep repeating myself, but that is what it is. It's not about making a product. It's not about I own a Jeep, right? And it's owned by a foreign company, but it's produced here. So, but farmland's a different thing for me. It's really a different thing. It's like a national security issue. And if you look at what happened during the pandemic, and I'll go a little bit further into this if you like.
Sure.
Chip production was all done in other countries, and now they're trying to bring those things back here to the states. They consider chip production a priority now, right? It can stop our economy. You've seen what it's done. The prices have gone up for cars, and it's raised people's personal property taxes because they're used cars.
We're going to talk about that after the break. So continue.
But you see, so it's been determined to be a national security thing, and there's no difference here. I think food is even more of a national security issue, that we need to feed our country, and I would love to see everybody in the world, not go hungry and all those other things. But I am at heart, I'm a Missourian and an American, and I care about us first. And that's kind of that's my attitude.
So I've noticed that Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft and Republican Senator Bill Eigel appear very interested in this topic. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's because they genuinely don't like that there's some farmland entities are foreign owned, or is this because they want an issue to whack Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe over the head on, since when Lieutenant Governor Kehoe was a Senator Kehoe, he voted for this in 2013?
So I guess let me put this in terms that I think there is definitely a political side to this issue for sure. If we look at when Hawley ran against Schaefer, he ran on this particular issue and he beat Kurt Schaefer. However, when he got to the Senate, to my knowledge, he has never put a piece of legislation out there that would bar any type of foreign ownership of farmland. So, that's the question you have to ask yourself: is this an issue they believe in, or this is the issue I've been filing for 5 years that I actually believe in, right? And I'm not running for statewide office. I am not running for that. So, what their motivations are, I'm not sure. Quite frankly, if you look at the voting record of Senator Eigel, I know in the past he's voted against this very bill that I'm proposing. It actually it might have been a little bit stiffer because I think it maybe took back the control of the land. But neither here nor there, he voted against it. Every Republican in the Senate voted against it.
When it was put up as an amendment or something.
Yeah, I think Senator Sifton did it like 2 years ago, and there was a roll call vote on it, and they all voted against it.
Yeah, and I don't know what bill that was attached to. It could have been like, well, we're not going to vote on this because it would kill this other piece of legislation. Yeah. So I don't know the context of that, because I know that became a very controversial thing last session where Republicans were complaining about other Republicans doing that. But continue.
What I will tell you is I'm on agriculture and joint agriculture. And I brought this issue up last year, and there was a pushback on it, and it was kind of left to the bottom, and nobody wanted to do anything about it. There has been a change in their opinions on this issue what that is. You maybe have to have those conversations with them. But I will tell you, I brought it up this year at about 3 a.m. on a bill as an amendment, and the entire Senate stopped. And whatever it was going to take, that amendment was not going to get on that bill, right? And so something's changed from that point to this point. So, you maybe have to ask them what's in their heart or whatever their change of outlook on this bill is. I don't know. I can't speak to that.
Well, I would love to peer into the hearts and minds and souls of Missouri politicians. But until I can, we'll be right back after this quick break with Senator Doug Beck. And we're back on Politically Speaking with Senator Doug Beck. He is a Democrat from Afton who represents the 1st Senatorial District. So I want to talk about a bunch of education issues. I know that before you entered the wacky world of Missouri politics, you were a member of the Afton Board of Education. So I think education issues are top of mind for you often. What education issues do you expect to tackle when session starts? I know you talked about that a little in the beginning, but I want to delve into that more specifically.
So the issues that I want to get into is like our teacher shortage. I think we need to get back to respecting our teachers and honoring our teachers. I think it's part of the reason why you see some of those folks leaving the field. You see the pipeline kind of being cut off. If you look at things in life, I'm in a trade union, and a lot of times you'll see it's a father-son or mother-daughter at this point now too, where they get into the trades, and it's kind of like education is kind of the same way. A teacher, a lot of times their offspring will get into that because that's where they're doing. But now they're saying, hey, you probably don't want to get into teaching, And we need to bring that back. We need to honor our teachers, like I said, and because that is where the rubber meets the road. That is where our kids get education, and they're able to realize their full potential. So I would like to see us be able to try to bring more folks back into the field. I have some bills to do that, actually working on. They're not filed yet, but they're going to be a part of maybe a different bill. Sometimes in the Senate you work as amendments and things of that nature.
Yes, that is how Democrats, especially Senate Democrats, pass a lot of things. There's been a lot of uproar recently about how some districts, most recently the Independent School District on the Kansas City side, have adopted a 4-day school week. And I've seen Democrats kind of as a bloc really criticize this idea. What do you think about going to 4-day school weeks? I'm interested in your take on that.
Jason, if they were doing it, if there was research out there that they found out that 4-day 4-day school weeks were advantageous for the kids and helped them learn better, then let's go with it, right? That's not why we're doing this. We're doing this to save money. We're doing this because the state of Missouri doesn't fund our schools. We have an outdated formula. And we can go into a lot of different. We got areas where, in my area in St. Louis County. Let's look at St. Louis County as a whole for the most part. We fund our schools probably 80 to 90% by our local property taxes, and then we fund the rural schools because the rural schools are kind of like inverse of that. They're flipped. They don't have that local taxing as much as we do. And so we're paying for schools twice. It's kind of like people talk about socialism. It's kind of like socialism in a way that we are paying for everything else in the state. And I'm fine with that. We've done that for a long time. However, the amount of money that the state puts in, if we want to look at different ways, I hear people complain about all these other things. We need to put more money into education. If we want to compete with these other states, we need to do things like that. We need to actually upgrade what we're doing here and not just attack and try to take money away from that same pot and put it into other educational so-called opportunities. Those things don't work. We've seen that across the board. I can, if we wanted to go that direction.
Well, we might in a little bit. But, some proponents of a 4-day school idea have said that teachers having an extra day to plan could actually increase retention and morale. Like, what do you think of that argument?
It probably morale-wise, it's probably great. I mean, if I was going to be getting paid the same, and they're definitely underpaid, especially in our rural areas. If I'm going to get paid the same and work 4 days a week, that would probably, it would be a better thing for me, right? So my morale would go up to some extent. However, what's happening in the classroom, the hours are not really increasing to the point to where there's a cutoff in hours. They say if you did, something to the equivalent of 180 school days, actually over 8 hours a day in the classroom, things would change. You would see scores. You would see some things happen there. Also, I hear stories of, and this is across the state, where the teachers have to come in Monday and unload the food trucks.
Or, I mean, like, okay, this is from my perspective. Maplewood Richmond Heights is 5 days a week. My wife and I both work. I don't know how we would be able to make a 4-day school week work when we both have jobs. I know that some of these schools are offering like the kids to be in school during that time, but that's still an expensive thing. Like, aftercare is not a cheap thing, and oftentimes parents have to pay for that. Like, what do you think of that point?
No, and that's a very good point, especially when with our elementary kids. They become latchkey kids on those days, those Fridays. Say if they use Fridays or Mondays, it's then they got idle hand. Then you got kids that are possibly they don't have the money for the childcare, so they got them staying at home. And you have those issues, but it also is an inconvenience for the parents. And you're absolutely right. Most homes are 2-income homes now, and you're not able to do that. It's kind of like. I remember when everybody went virtual, the parents, and I'm sure you could probably attest to that.
I would rather stab myself in the face again than go virtual.
Yeah, so
I know that sound and okay. I know this wasn't the direction we were thinking. I do have to ask this question. I know Democrats are really upset about a 4-day school week, but I don't. It's hard for me to forget that the people who were arguing against going back to in-person instruction during COVID were primarily Democrats. Like, how do you reconcile those two positions? And before you answer that, there were sometimes really good reasons not to go back to in-person school right away. But, like, there's no doubt about it that keeping kids out of the classroom in person had some really negative ramifications.
So I'll talk about that. And hindsight is definitely 20/20, right? But at the time, if you recall, it was a different time when we first started going through this in 2020. We did not know. We did not know what was going to happen. If you could die. A lot of people died from it in the beginning. And I'll be honest with you, if I was a school board member and you faced me with that, do you want to, go virtual? Or do you want to have a kid come in here and possibly have to go to a school board meeting and say that some kid died, or they brought it home to grandma and grandma died from because they went to school? I would have made that decision to go virtual, right? So that was early on. As time went on, we found out. So it's not like you can't go back in time. But at the time,
and I think I'm okay. I agree with you on that. But what I'm really talking about is like 2021, where there was still a lot of pushback against people going back into in-person instruction. 2020, I absolutely understand. But again, the people that were arguing against going back to in-person schools were almost exclusively Democrats then. So, again, is there a disconnect here?
Well, I think what I saw in 21, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, because my view is look, if you can mitigate it, if you can wear masks, if we can have clean buildings, if we can change the air quality, and those were all things that they put money into, and some school districts did it, and some school districts didn't do it. But if you could make it a safe environment for our teachers and our kids, I was definitely for going back to in-person learning. I think it helps everything, right? I was deemed a essential worker back in the day because I was actually still working as a pipe fitter. So we were out in 20 and 21. I was out in a thing. But if you recall, people were held up in their homes. You were keeping 6 foot away from your own family members. There was a lot of things going on, but fast forward to when the schools came to policies that, wearing masks was the way they were going to go about it, and they're going to be able to do in-person learning. And then we had an attorney general trying to take that away from them. It was almost like they didn't want us to go in person. They wanted us to go back into virtual.
There's also this talk about eliminating the personal property tax, or scaling it back, or eliminating the state portion. I'm sure that could become more pronounced because I just got my personal property tax bill, and it was very expensive in St. Louis County. So I think this could be top of mind to actual ordinary voters. What would be kind of your thought process behind this issue?
So, personal property tax, and I pay it too, just like everybody else. Mine went up. Also, my used car went up in value, in value on it, and that's part of what people are seeing. But But if we look at a personal property tax of what it goes to, and that's what people got to keep in mind. The lion's share of that goes to your local school district. Over 60% goes to your local school district. The next biggest portion goes to your local fire districts. After that, in our area, we have special school districts, so that's the third biggest one. And then it drops down. The state is a very small amount. We can get rid if they want to get rid of the state amount on the personal property tax. I probably don't have an issue with that at all. If that amount is the amount they want to get out. However, they're going to come in and try to cut it to our schools. And until we actually fund the schools from the state, or you find a different funding source, how do we replace that? Mm-hmm. It's easy to say we just keep cutting and cutting and cutting, but how do we fund our schools? And do I say this is the best way to fund our schools? I'm not saying that.
Yeah. Do you think, though, that especially in St. Louis County, I'm not sure what the situation is in other counties, because some counties, I saw a news report that like Jefferson County is trying to do personal property tax at a lesser clip than St. Louis County. Do you think that this could provide a temporary windfall to some school districts that could mitigate some of the retention and salary issues we talked about at the beginning of the show?
It could. If they spend it wisely, it also could actually lower their rate. Mm-hmm. So school boards have the opportunity every 2 years to lower their rate for their property tax and their personal property tax. So yes, it could mitigate the salaries. It could put more money into our schools and help with our teacher retention. I think we pay at a higher rate here in St. Louis County. If you look at the average of the pay that goes to teachers, we pay higher than definitely in the rural area does. But it could go to help that. It also could hurt if we take that away, and that's going to probably be the push this year. And you're absolutely right. People saw this go up. It'll probably drop next year, and it'll drop the year after that. But right now it went up, and people are going to see that. But I think once they see what it all goes to is what do you want to cut? What parts do you want to cut? Our county, and we look at that, we have a budget issue here in our county, and there's a 6% line that goes to that, just the general fund.
In the last few minutes, let's talk about some assorted issues. You mentioned before the show there are some specific bills that you are going to be trying to push this session that are not necessarily related to education or not necessarily related to foreign ownership of farmland. What are they going to be?
So I have a couple. I have one. There's a complex being built on in Chesterfield, and this will be the second year I'm carrying the bill. We're trying to bring a brand new industry into Missouri, an entertainment industry on the music side, to where we can bring in big name concerts where they'll come in here and rehearse and do some stuff, and then leave from the Missouri, St. Louis area, do 2 concerts in our state, and go out on stadium tours and stuff. It'll bring in a lot of high-paying, large-paying jobs that, 75, 80,000, 85,000 to 100,000 a year, and well over 100 jobs it's going to bring in to the area of new jobs that are not here now.
That's really interesting you mentioned that, because I was talking with somebody the other day that St. Louis in particular often gets skipped when it comes to bands coming through a tour. I'll give you an example. SZA is a very popular R&B artist who is literally from St. Louis, and her tour to support her excellent new album SOS is not coming to St. Louis for some reason. Have you heard from people that St. Louis in particular just isn't a very marketable or good place to have music concerts come to it? And do you think that a bill like this could improve that situation?
Well, that would just be kind of like a byproduct of the bill to have 2 concerts within the state. And a lot of times, so the issue, and she may have went to Kansas City. So if you look at it, and what I talked to, if something within a 300-mile range, they consider that one metropolitan area. So so a lot of times artists will just come to St. Louis,
or they'll just go to Kansas City and skip over St. Louis and go to Chicago, basically. But continue.
Right, but they do both. So Pearl Jam's here. I'm a huge Pearl Jam fan. So,
yeah.
So if everybody knows that, but they came to St. Louis, and I waited from 2020 to see their concert again. But they've been to St. Louis every time that they've come to the state, right? And we're a great city as far as that goes. We fill all these venues up. However, it's just not profitable for these bigger tours, these bigger stadium type tours that you're probably talking about. The folks in the industry tell me that when you got those 2 overlapping metropolitan areas, people from St. Louis can go to Kansas City to see this show.
Yeah, I've always wondered that, so I'm glad we touched on this issue. What are some other bills that you're going to be doing as well?
I would really love to bring back the film tax credit. If we see what's happening in Georgia, it's just been, it's been game changing for that state. There's a lot of different projects going on there. I like to bring the film tax credit back to the state. It costs us literally nothing if we don't do anything here, and it costs us nothing anyway because it just comes off the top. So I would love to bring that back here. If you look at Oklahoma, they've got several things going on right now. They got Tulsa, some other shows they're shooting down there, and this would give the ability to come back to St. Louis, Missouri. If you look at Ozark, it was not done here. It's just all revenue that should be coming back. We have so many of these people that are in that industry that are working in other states, Chicago, Oklahoma, and Georgia, that are actually from the Missouri, that they would be able to come back and actually work in their own state.
I think the last movie of consequence that was filmed in Missouri was Winter's Bone, which was filmed in the Nixa, Springfield area. But a lot of, you're right.
Are Up in the Air. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, Up in the Air was also filmed
shot
in St. Louis.
Afton.
In Afton,
yeah.
And also there was a couple of shots at the parking garage that I used to park in when I worked for a certain legal publication in the city as well. So, but it does seem like a lot of things that are based in Missouri are filmed in like Canada or California or elsewhere, and it's because of the film tax credit, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's unfortunate that we have to do that. So you have to compete with other states and give some sort of money, and this is the way it's gone in almost every industry at this point. Somebody's looking for some sort of, use the term handout, but they're using for some sort of tax relief or something or whatever the case may be, an incentive to bring that business here.
So what do you think that the prospects of these types of bills passing are going to be? Because I know that Republicans have passed legislation in the past that, was aimed at bringing like the World Cup to Kansas City. So they are
just last year.
Yeah, they are enthused often about using economic incentives to lure entertainment type things here. But I think people have tried to revive the film tax credit for years and have had no success. It's what do you think the prospects are for this type of thing?
I think actually both of those, because both the bills I was talking about kind of fit together, because some of that could be done in that facility that's being built. So I think it's a very good prospects. It's a very bipartisan issue. I've had conversations with several senators, and then there's some House members too that are on board with this. We need to bring this back here. It's another whole revenue stream for the state. It's good paying jobs, solid paying. We're not creating minimum wage jobs. We're creating good paying, high tech jobs in the state, and we need to bring those back.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for joining us today on Politically Speaking. Politically Speaking is a product of St. Louis Public Radio, which is a part of the University of Missouri St. Louis. You can read all of our coverage at stlpr.org. And Senator, how can people find you either on social media or any other parts of the World Wide Web?
Well, I'm on Twitter at DougBeck562, and then I'm on Facebook. I think Doug Beck. If you put in Doug Beck politician, you'll find me there on Facebook. Also, my email address as far as the state goes is doug.beck@senate.mo.gov. Those are easy ways. I won't give out my cell phone here, but
yeah, we're not going to force you to do that, Senator. Until next time, so long.
Thank you, Jason.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is Politically Speaking.